The old way was a lot harder. And so that access to connections, the access to information, it drives capital flow into real estate offerings and real estate investors, which in turn gets placed into the marketplace, and that drives cap rates down, which drives pricing up and thins out margins. So yeah, I would say that all else being equal, if there was no such thing as the internet today, would cap rates be higher? I think they absolutely would.
This is the real estate investing experience. We get it. Real estate can be rough sometimes, and that's why we bring in the experts to talk about the experiences you won't hear anywhere else with your hosts, John Cohen and Chris Grinzik.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Investing Experience. I'm your host, Chris Grinzik. With me, as always, is John Cohen. How's it going?
We're good. We had both of us had some disappointing lunches. We're not going to get into the detail because we got a phenomenal guest, and we are a little pressed for time. But no complaints, right? As I said, we're rolling. Christmas is coming up. The end of the year is coming up, and they're passing stimuluses. Maybe who knows if they're good or bad? People are complaining, but that's what people do. So we're here. Hopefully, we provide some value. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, we can't even get together to complain, so we got to amplify because we're all separated now for the most part.
I see people post on LinkedIn and Facebook. I am not one to rip on people, but
really?
I mean, at least on a public forum like that, right? I'll complain all day behind their back or to their face in person. But if I have to hear someone else complain about not getting free money, I mean, I get it. It's not enough. People want more. Get the fuck over it, right? Get up, make something of yourself, go get a job. There's a million places to hire. I just can't deal with people complaining about getting free shit. I mean, it is what it is. Get over it.
I hear you. Well, that's a great place to lead off. For so much for not complaining. We'll throw that wrench into the mix. But let's jump into today's episode because we got a great guest on. Happy to dive right into it. But with that being said, Brian, thank you so much for coming on, bud.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. For people who are only listening to this podcast, you didn't see John just flashed up Brian's book. What's it called? The Hands-Off Investor. Did I read that right?
That's it.
That is correct.
But why don't you tell everybody a little bit about you, kick things off?
Right on. Well, I'm a full-time real estate investor. I started investing in 1989, so it's 31 years ago, and I started in single family like most people would, and bought a house to rent out, and it was a total failure. And then I thought, wow, this real estate investing thing's pretty cool because I suck at it, so let me do it again. So I did it again, and it didn't have the greatest result the second time around. And being a perpetual glutton for punishment, I just kept going. And I guess that's part of what makes you successful in this business, is just never giving up if you really believe that it's the only thing that you're good for. And that's kind of what I felt, is this was going to be my calling one way or another. In the meantime, I was working a job in law enforcement. So I was kind of working like evenings and weekends, which made it nice because I had the whole business week off. So I spent the whole business week kind of trying to figure out how to make a real estate business. And I was working for a living at night. And I did that for, about 14 years. It took me to build the business up to the point where I felt I could sustain myself, hung up the job, and have been doing nothing but investing in real estate ever since. We kind of grew that single family side of our business quite a bit, and then started into multifamily about 20 years ago. And, now we've bought over 3,000 units, most of them in the last 10 years or so, and still growing. So here we are.
Mm-hmm. So how many deals did you actually do poorly on before you did one that did well?
Oh, man. I think there was really only two that I did. The first one I lost money on. The second one I made like $1,000. And, the third one, I think I made like $5,000. And then after that, it started to get a little bit better. And I was starting to see profits that actually made kind of all this work a little bit worthwhile. Then of course you have a string of success, then you have a couple failures to remind you that you need to stay humble and never think that you know everything, because it's really easy to think like I've got it now. I've had 3 successful deals, and now I know everything. And here I am. I think I've bought somewhere around 750 properties. Last year I crossed a $500 million mark in properties that I've bought, and I'm here to tell you I don't know everything. And after 30 years, I'm still learning stuff. and always will be learning stuff.
Mm-hmm. How do you, because I think that's interesting, especially for myself, kind of going off on my own recently. How do you have confidence then in what you're doing if you feel like you continually don't know what you're doing, or you're still constantly learning different things?
Well, because as you're doing it, you think you know everything. You only learn after the fact that you didn't really know squat.
Sure.
You think, oh, this is a brilliant idea, it's a great idea, I'm going to do this, and then you get your hand slapped, and you go, well, that was dumb. What was I thinking? And so then the next time around, you go, okay, now I know everything because I screwed up on the last deal, so I won't do that again. So I'll do this instead, and that's going to be smart. So you go out and you do it, and you get your hand slapped, and you go, oh, now there's two things I shouldn't do. But all the way along, you always think you know it all.
That's for sure. I joke about it on here all the time. I say, I don't know why people trust us. We have no idea what we're doing, right? It's trial by fire sometimes. But I think it's a lesson learned, right? You can get kicked, right? You get back up though, and yet, as long as you don't make the same mistake twice, right? And I'm sure that's something that you're very good at not doing, and you might make similar mistakes, but you make a mistake, you learn from it, and you grow. It's when you do the same thing over and over again, that's when the wheels come off the bus. But no, I agree 100%. I think there's something to be said about learning as you're going, and I think it takes a very courageous person to say, listen, I'm not the smartest, because everyone thinks they're the smartest person in the room. But to willingly admit that, it's something that I do all the time. Say, listen, I'm going to take advice from people that know it a lot better than me, because at the end of the day, we're all learning through this together. There's no one that's perfect. Everyone's going to make a little bit of a mistake. It's just how you overcome from that mistake is probably going to dictate, the success or failure of that project.
Yeah, it's funny, that's they say that experience, good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment, right? So, that's how everybody learns. It's just part of the process, and staying humble about it and understanding that that's what you're doing is really important, because everybody always wants to say that, oh, I won't make those mistakes. I learn from other people's mistakes. I read the books, I watch the videos, I read the threads on Bigger Pockets. I listen to podcasts. I hear about all these mistakes, so I won't make them. I'm here to tell you, you will make them. You'll ignore what everybody says, and you'll do what you think is right anyway, and you'll make the mistakes until you make the mistake yourself. And that's why, experienced real estate investors really have something to offer to the world, because they've kind of been through what I call the rookie mistake phase of their career. Now if they make a mistake, it's a pretty complex, complicated, convoluted thing where it's not something really simple and dumb. More often than not, that is.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that's something I actually just recently spoke about on our prior episode was, the day where you had to make the mistake because the resources weren't there for you, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 20 years ago, yeah, you had to do it because there wasn't as many resources for you. And something I said before, they always told us that a stupid question, there's no such thing as a stupid question. Well, today there are stupid questions because you can Google things and you can find it out. But at the end of the day, we're all 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds, and your parents tell you not to touch something or don't do it. And inevitably 9 out of 10 of us are going to do it. But it's so much easier to get something back on course with technology, with internet, with books. If you want to be an investor, read about how to be a passive investor, per Brian's book. If you want to learn how to be a syndicator, read those books, understand it, but you still have to take action, and actions are always going to come up mistakes. But, can you speak to when you make a mistake in the past and how today maybe that mistake would be easier to avoid with the information that you've obtained and that's out there for you to obtain?
Well, geez, when I started in this business, there was barely such a thing as the internet. It was a dial-up connection through a modem where you had, your throughput rate would take you half an hour to download a picture. That's how the internet was when I started in this business. And now I can Google Map and get an aerial view of anything, do a street view to check out the neighborhood and all that stuff before I even get past square one on looking at a property. So there's a lot of information out there. Things like median incomes is available at your fingertips. Crime statistics are available at your fingertips. There's so many things that before you would go, well, geez, I didn't really know that, the incomes were low, or I didn't really know that people couldn't afford to pay this rent. Now you can get a lot of that information ahead of time and not have to learn the hard way.
That's awesome.
So do you think, because I'm curious, right, as information becomes more readily available, that it's making the margins on deals incredibly slimmer, or do you think it's a function of what's happened with interest rates and cap rates?
Well, I think, it's kind of those, that's the same question asked two different ways, because cap rate is really a function of market sentiment. And market sentiment is really a function of people's confidence in the market, which comes from them having information. So, a well-informed investor finds good deals or finds deals, whether they're good or not, I guess is subject to debate. And, and they put money out, and, they're able to get their word out about what investment offerings they have to their base of investors, which helps them raise more money. I mean, imagine a world where if you wanted to raise money, you had to go to the country club on every Thursday night dinners and powwow and rub elbows with people. Instead of sending out an email blast to 2,500 people on your email list and posting on social media and whatever the hell else it is that we do to raise money. The old way was a lot harder. And so that access to connections, the access to information, it drives capital flow into real estate offerings and real estate investors, which in turn gets placed into the marketplace, and that drives cap rates down, which drives pricing up and thins out margins. I would say that all else being equal, if there was no such thing as the internet today, would cap rates be higher? I think they absolutely would.
Gotcha. That's interesting. Another question I have that I've always been curious about, and sorry to cut you off, John, but when people talk about like the stock market and, especially now with like the Robinhood investors, right? So many people say those people don't move the market, right? It's the massive hedge funds that are buying up tons of stuff, or the massive PE firms or whatever, that are really the ones that are driving the change in the market, because, the individuals just don't have enough. Do you think that's the same in commercial real estate, or do you think it's different, and why?
Yeah, I think it's the same dynamic. There's hundreds of billions of dollars of dry powder available amongst the largest institutional buyers. So if they weren't there, then the smaller groups, shops like ours that are, kind of mid-sized shops with, $500 million under management type stuff, us guys could come in and buy all kinds of Class A brand new stuff. But we can't, because the institutions who can have access to very cheap capital from pension funds, et cetera, maybe they only have to generate an 8% return. So they can go and buy up all that, really high quality real estate, trophy properties, Class A stuff, which means that, the smaller mid-sized shops who maybe need to deliver a higher rate of return to attract capital can't get into that marketplace now. So we fall down the ladder to the next tier. And so we get the A- product, the mid-sized properties, the, 10 to 20 to $30 million stuff. And that's where we get to play. And since we squeeze out the mom and pops from those sectors, the mom and pops are stuck with maybe older and 70s and 60s product, and, deals a lot of hair on them and that sort of thing. So it all kind of trickles down. If the big behemoths weren't out there, then everybody could move up the ladder a little bit and spread their money around. But they can't, and that causes, again, yield compression. I mean, what yield really is it's a function of cost of capital, right? I mean, when you think about it, what you're doing with a property, a commercial real estate that's an income generating property, is you're trying to generate a return on the capital that you were given to make that acquisition. That's what everybody's doing. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're Blackstone. I don't care if you're just the one first time syndicator with country club money. All you're trying to do is generate a return for your investor. Now, the difference is that the Blackstones of the world only have to generate an 8% return, but the country club guy has to be able to figure out a way to generate a 15 to 20% return to get his country club buddies to invest in it. And that's really what it comes down to is, the guys with the big money have smaller yields to get, and they can drive that pricing up.
Gotcha. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's where it comes back to what we were saying on the last one about that, your cap rate and what you're purchasing stuff shouldn't be a function of what the debt available is, but of what you want the property to do. And I think that ties in a little bit to exactly what we're saying of, you should be paying for what you think you can achieve in returns. The debt is just going to amplify it. It shouldn't be the reason you pay a certain price for a certain asset.
Well, you're absolutely right about that. I mean, thinking that cap rate moves real estate prices is the tail wagging the dog. That's not how it works. Real estate prices are what moves cap rates. Cap rates don't move real estate prices. And the way this works, at least if people are doing it properly, and certainly the guys with big money are, is they're underwriting an acquisition price of property to figure out what the sweet spot is for them to pay to generate the return they need to satisfy their cost of capital. That's really all this comes down to. I need to get an 8% return for my investor. So in order for me to do that, if I'm putting this much down and I'm borrowing this much at this interest rate, I can pay X and generate that 8% return. Anything under that, I can generate more. But the most I can pay is X to get the 8% return. Now, if interest rates are lower, you can obviously pay more to still get your 8% return because your interest on your loan, your leverage is less. Conversely, if interest rates go up, you have to pay less to get your 8% return for the same stream of income. So that's really all this is. The cap rate is simply dividing the income by the purchase price and arriving at a value. Well, the purchase price is established by the cost of capital, not by the cap rate. It's the other way around from what most people think.
Yeah. I mean, when people view investing in different things, some people only like certain asset classes, but if you could only make 5% in real estate and you could make 25% in the stock market, I guarantee you very few people would be putting money into real estate unless they conversely thought the stock market was, 6 times more risky. Then, you kind of weigh that up. But obviously, I think all things being equal, they wouldn't. So it comes back to as people look around different things, they kind of weigh up what they're willing to take. If somebody was putting in money into the debt market and getting, 3, 4, 5, 6% a couple years ago, and now they're only getting, 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, now they may be looking at the equity position on that real estate where they can get back up closer to where they were of that, let's call it 7, 8, 9, or upwards of, 10 to 15%, depending upon what type of real estate you're in. They're going to weigh up the risk reward of those things and move it around. So you're 100% right. And I agree with you that, the capital behind it is going to be driving what people are willing to pay for something based on what they want to make for that asset class.
Yep. That's the only thing driving value.
Pete, that's because, I'm sure you get the question. I know we get the question all the time. Is this a good deal or a bad deal? So it doesn't matter. It could be a great deal for you because your cost of capital is X, and it's a horrible deal for me because I need to generate more. So, at the end of the day, when you're looking at a deal, like you said, you back into what you can pay to make what you believe you have to and what you can. So the rest of that stuff is, it's out there, but the deciding factor is what you need to make is what you're willing to pay. And people don't realize that enough, even from the first time buyer to the, as it gets sophisticated, they understand that. But the first time buyer reads a book or sees an article and thinks they need to make X. Meanwhile, their cost of capital is a fraction of the price. And that's, one of the catalysts that's out there. But something you said earlier that I wanted to touch on was as information becomes more available and as, the bigger guys keep playing in this space and the international money and all that stuff, there's a conflicting thought, right? Well, we just went through a pandemic. Unemployment's really high. There's a lot that can go wrong. I read something in the day that there's I think it's like 68 million people are facing eviction in the first month of this year. Well, now they're supposed to be extending the moratorium. But how does information, because real estate still is not necessarily as technological advanced as a lot of other industries, but how does technology play into, in your opinion, the future of, why everyone says, oh my God, that, the world's going to end. There's a huge bubble coming. But as these things become more available and easier to understand, what do you think that plays into the future of the whole space, whether it's multifamily or whatever it is? Because I still think that's probably got some legs behind it and why you're seeing such growth in some areas that you would have never seen growth before.
Well, I think one of the big things about technology that the way it impacts real estate right now that maybe a lot of people aren't thinking about is what it allows people to do. And I don't mean real estate investors, I mean ordinary people. to do that they otherwise couldn't do before. So let's run through a few examples. One is I can order anything online from Amazon that I want, almost anything. So therefore, the stores are almost completely redundant. I mean, I have not had to put on a mask one single time to go buy a Christmas present this year, which if I went to any brick and mortar store, I would be required to do, because I can order everything online now. So that changes the landscape of, it used to be, Main and Main was coveted real estate for that retail property because, everybody would come there to buy whatever it is that they needed. Well, now, there's coveted real estate in, back corners of cities in far remote areas that, you would think like that's worthless real estate. But boy, you could put a 700,000 square foot distribution center there, and it's a key piece of the infrastructure for distributing this product throughout that region. So that formerly worthless real estate is now very valuable, and Main and Main is suffering, and anybody that's occupying that space at Main and Main probably can't pay their rent right now. So that's one way that technology has changed things. Another way is I'm sitting right here in my office here in Santa Rosa, recording this podcast. I can go home, which isn't far from my office, but I can go home. I have a home office there that is almost a mirror image of this exact office. From within that office, I have access to absolutely everything that I have access to right this very second. I have VPNs into all of our servers. I have, access to every document, every database, every service that I use. There's no difference between me working from home as working from here. I also can go to Hawaii and sit on the beach with my laptop, my cell phone, my iPad, my internet connection, and do about 95% of everything I can do right here sitting in this office. So what that technology has allowed is it has allowed people who previously had to work in an office to work from anywhere in the world, which now means that the office building in downtown, which used to be the coveted skyscraper, is sitting pretty empty right now. And yet all the productivity that was taking place within the walls of that office tower are still happening. They're just happening in people's homes all around the area. So now that downtown property is suffering somewhat. Yet residential is starting to take off, where people are looking for bigger homes with a home office. Maybe they're looking to get out of the metro cores and into more suburb because they don't need to be so close to work. Maybe they say, you know what, forget this, $1.5 million, 800 square foot bungalow in Palo Alto. I'm going to go move to Phoenix, Arizona, pay half the price for 4 times the square footage, and I'm still going to keep my job at Facebook and make California wages with half the cost of living. So that's starting to shift real estate values in markets where, there's nice weather, markets where people want to move to, places that have no state income tax, and places like California, especially the Bay Area, Los Angeles, are suffering. They're seeing population declines. The last time I heard about a population decline was like Buffalo, New York, 75 years ago, went into a population decline, and it's been in one now for over 75 years. Well, Los Angeles County just suffered its first population decline. There's now fewer people in LA County this year than there was last year. And those trends don't turn on a dime. That's a slow process that happens for a long time and lasts for a long time. So I think you'll see a decline in California to some extent, and you're going to see the benefactor being some of these other markets. So when you think about multifamily values and single family values in places like Arizona, Texas, Georgia, Florida, Washington State, these places with no state income tax and decent weather, there's going to be a major impact. And without technology, that would not have been possible. So this has really upended everything in real estate. And our job is to kind of figure out these trends and stay in front of them.
No, I think that's, we've been saying it too. Like, there are some areas that are going to experience some hurt, but at the same time, not to think there's deals out there because the debt world's a little sideways or the market's crazy. It's going to make these other areas more competitive. And how you are better at your job and our roles is to maybe look past that. Like you said, maybe it's a Tennessee because of the state income tax. Maybe it's an area like that where you're seeing migration patterns from the Northeast, and California out. Chris is the perfect example of that. Chris born, raised, and lived in New York his whole life. And a month ago, move to Florida. So, that's the norm. And if you can get behind that trend, there are still deals there. And is it cap rate driven? Is it market price driven? Is it yield driven? Is it debt driven? Well, you got to think that. And that's what technology allows us to do, where it used to be in an office on a computer. Now it allows you to track that, figure that out anywhere. So I think, is the market in a downturn? Who the hell knows? But I still think if the right opportunity is still there, just finding it's going to take a different set of lenses than what it would have been 12 months ago, 24 months ago, or whatever that is.
Well, you said something interesting there. You said, is the market in a downturn? And the key word there in that statement was the word the market. There is no the market, right? I mean, there's markets everywhere and they're all different and very unique. So you could say that the California market might be in a downturn, or maybe you might say the San Francisco market's in a downturn. You might say the LA market's in a downturn. You might say that the New York City market is in a downturn, but you sure as hell wouldn't say the Tampa, Florida market is in a downturn, or that the Phoenix, Arizona market is in a downturn. We just saw people laughed about this, but Elon Musk just moved to Texas. Oracle just is moving their headquarters to Texas. These are real things that over time are going to have a real impact. And it's not like you go, oh, Elon Musk moved to Texas, the whole world's going to fall apart. No. But as I mentioned before, these demographic shifts happen slowly. They happen over time, but they happen and they stay consistent. And when you start to see a change in tide, that tide usually rolls in the direction of the change for a considerable amount of time. Buffalo's been in a population decline for 75 years. So if California is starting to turn that way, it could get a lot worse before it gets better. And it could be that way for a while. So, the market here in California might be one thing, but there's opportunity somewhere. Our job is to go find it.
No, I like that a lot, because it's easy to look in the mirror and be negative and talk about all the things on why I can't do something or why it's not going to work. But at the same time, just like my complaint about people complaining about free money, well, think a little different and get outside the box, because there are areas that are absolutely exploding and projected to continue exploding. Yes. So it's important to be ahead of that.
100% agree. And it's interesting. I've been doing some studies of markets all across the country, looking at what I call a post-COVID recovery, which I'm defining as kind of the period between 2022 and 2024. And I'm looking for markets that are projected to have robust rent growth during that time. And it's really interesting to look at the disproportionate forecasts for rent growth rates across these markets. And, you've got Tucson, Arizona and Phoenix, Arizona, which lead the country by a wide margin. And then there's kind of everybody else, right? And then you've got, some other good ones, some Florida markets, some Texas markets, and then you've got, kind of all these other stragglers who, maybe have no rent growth projection at all in 2022 through 2024. So there's not just two different worlds, there's a lot of different worlds. And it really is just a matter of finding the right combination that works for you.
I couldn't agree more.
Because I'm sure a lot of people are going to want to look at some of that same stuff now that you brought it up. Where are you looking to find that information? Like, what sources are you using, and different databases and stuff?
We get our information from Axiometrics and CoStar. Mm-hmm. Of course, they're both paid services. They're very expensive. But for us, we have a national footprint. We own in multiple states across the country and plan to continue to do so. And so for us, market selection is kind of everything. We're always looking for, where the tide is going. We're buying where people are moving to, not where people are moving from. We're buying where there's positive forecasted rent growth. We're specifically looking at markets that have current positive forecasted rent growth, but we're also looking at markets that have forecasted future rent growth, but negative current rent growth, because that spells an interesting opportunity. And so, having that data for us is like a roadmap, and it tells us, where do we want to be investing and how do we want to be investing and when do we want to be investing? So unfortunately, it just comes at a cost.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for a group like you, right, you're not, the first time syndicator by all means. When you're looking at that stuff, it's important, like you said, maybe there's negative rent growth for the next couple of years and then positive after that, or whatever it looks like. But then I'm sure there's a supply and demand that factors into that, because if you see a really good market, but there's just not enough stock or there's not enough turnover of stock, how do you go about, okay, checks off the initial boxes, but what's the next step to say, okay, we could set up shop there, we can scale there, or, if it's a good market, a one-off deal just works for you? What do you prefer, like to see, and or, one or the other?
Well, certainly any market we go into, we like to achieve some scale, but we've been very successful even when we haven't. We've been successful in Atlanta. We've got around 2,000 units in that market, and so we managed to build a pretty sizable portfolio in Atlanta, and we've been successful there. Having said that, we had 230, I think it was 232 units at a single property in not Orlando, in Tampa, Florida. It was our only asset there, and we were enormously successful. We round tripped it earlier this year and generated like a 26% net investor IRR and a 31, 32, 33 gross IRR on an acquisition from 3 years ago when people said pricing was already high. We were enormously successful on that, and it was our only asset in that market. So we've kind of figured out how to be successful both ways. So certainly I'm opportunistic. If the right opportunity comes up in a market we're not currently in, that's a segue into establishing a footprint in that market. And once we have an asset in a market, we would certainly love to expand on that portfolio even more.
So I think another thing that people definitely want to understand and know, obviously, I know that you guys don't third-party manage, right? You're managing your own deals. Does that, because the other day I was actually sitting at an investor, we were getting a cup of coffee Saturday morning, and he texted our property manager a picture of us to say, hey, look, I'm with John. And then he said his son was coming for his job. So then our property manager wrote back and said, well, my job sucks. He can have it if he wants it. How does, that internal management help you? Or sometimes it's in those opportunistic situations, it probably helps more than in Atlanta, where you could probably find really good third-party management. But can you speak to that point? Because I know we have a ton of people that ask, third-party manage, self-manage in my backyard. How do you go about that, that shift to third-party, or has it always been internal and you never had third-party?
No, I started out with third-party management, and and the third-party manager that said my job sucks, you can have it, he's probably right. When you think about it, property management is a business I never wanted to be in. I don't like it. In fact, I hate it. I'm not good at it. It's just not my cup of tea. It feels like being in charge of a bunch of school children or something. So it is a thankless job, and from a third-party property manager's perspective, it really sucks because, for them, if they do a bad job, they get fired. If they do a good job, the owner sells the property and makes a ton of money and they get fired. So, no matter how they look at it, they have a constant struggle. I mean, it's a challenging business to be in, for sure, to be a third-party property manager. But for us real estate investors, they're necessary. When I first branched out and was buying assets across the country, I needed that on-the-ground expertise. I needed that on-the-ground physical presence. I needed the extra help. I needed the team. And they brought things I could never have brought myself. They would have people that could help with renovation. They found me contractors and insurance people and lenders, and just the list goes on and on. I could pick up the phone and say, what about this property? Oh, it's a bad neighborhood. You don't want to be over there. Go over here, and that really is enormously valuable information for an investor that's kind of just getting started out. And we did that for years. And our portfolio got to around 1,500 units before we ended up starting to self-manage. And it's a move I might not have ever made had it not just been, the fortunate luck of, coming in contact with the right people. The only reason I did it is when I had 3 new team members join my company. One of them had been the president of a very large institutional management company and had actually formed that group for that institutional investor, and had also done it 6 times before for other institutional investors. And that gave me the ability to start up a property management company for our own internal assets, have it run by somebody who's been doing it for 40 years, had about 50,000 units of management experience in almost every state. and take all of his policy and procedures manuals and systems and everything and plug and play it into a management company in a box, basically, and then run it. And then bring his most trusted team members that he's worked with for 30 plus years in key roles along with him. Had I not had that lucky break, I would have had a very much more difficult decision to go transition into vertical integration. But since I was able to do that, I was able to get all the benefits of internal management, such as, having full control of the asset, systems integration, all those things, without, one, having to be a property manager, and two, doing something I suck at. Instead, I got somebody that was really good at it, and it was the right call for us to make at that time. It's not for everyone.
Now that's good information, because I think some people get lost on, giving up control and they want to do it. But at the end of the day, I'm in the same position. I hate it. There's nothing worse than that role. So understanding that you're not good at it is good. But coming across the right opportunity makes it a lot better.
Mm-hmm. Was there anything you noticed when you switched from third party to internal management that was surprising to you, or there was big changes or things that you found that were a lot simpler, or it was, not like a massive difference?
No, it wasn't a massive difference. I would say that probably the most notable difference to us was that it allowed us to get access to even more information than we had before. As a management company, we have an additional revenue stream from the management fee that, we can use to pay some really bright minds to oversee our real estate. And it leaves a little bit left over for us to invest in data sources, like I mentioned earlier, to give us that data, which we need from a property management perspective too, because that's some of how we get our rent comps, and and we use that for managing our properties and comparing our performance versus our competitors. That's needed data, but we also get to use it for our acquisition side and for making decisions on markets and such.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that when I moved down to Florida to start managing, that I always saw that having that extra revenue stream allows you to hire other people that can do a lot of other things that are going to be better at different things than I am. And the goal is to quickly as possible hire somebody to handle the day-to-day maintenance and management so that I don't have to do it, because very similar to yourself, I've never done it. I'm definitely not good at it. Just because I've never really done it, and I really have no desire to do it long term. But I think it solves some problems that makes it tough when you don't have it vertically integrated, like bringing on other people, getting information, having the same systems and processes for every single deal, especially if you work with multiple third-party managers where you may not have a national company that can do it all. You may be forced to be a little bit regionalized or forced to work with multiple companies. So I think some of that stuff does solve a lot of those problems that isn't always the easiest thing to know from the outside looking in until, like we were talking about earlier, you kind of experience it for yourself, even though, you've read all the books and listened to all the podcasts and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's 100% true. It's, people want to say stuff like, and this is where it gets kind of funny. Nobody it will manage my assets better than I can, or nobody's going to pay closer attention to it than I will, and all these other kinds of statements. And, back earlier at the top of this podcast, I said something like, we always want to think we know it all. Well, when you get into managing your own real estate, you'll quickly come to learn how much you know versus don't know. And, I certainly have my horror story to share. Was my very first rental that I bought. I thought I was brilliant. And, I read all the books that told you how to rent out units and how to do, all the background checks and all that. And I did everything just like it said. And then when the two girls showed up and I was there to turn over the keys, they're like, oh, we couldn't make it to the bank to get the cashier's check for the deposit and the first month's rent. Can we just give you a personal check? I'm like, oh man, I read in the book you should never do that. But, you guys are really nice. I checked you out. Your credit's good. Your jobs are good. Everything's good. So yeah, go ahead. So they wrote me the check. I probably don't need to tell you, the check bounced and I never saw a dime from them. And I had to evict them all the way to the sheriff, literally removing them from the property. And then they left all their personal belongings behind, which I had to auction off because they never came back for them. So this, of course you read in the books, don't ever do that, but you're like, oh, that's okay, I can do it. Property management is difficult. And that was my very first tenant placement experience. And it taught me quickly, I should not be in that business. And it's just not for everyone.
That's like, so I'm selling a piece of property that I own. It's a small piece of property. So the guy goes, I really don't want to wire you money. Can I just mail you a check? And I'm like, yeah, no, that's not going to work. I said, that's happened before. I said, you can mail me the check and I'm going to wait till it to clear before we do anything. He's like, oh yeah, I'll just wire the money. I was like, yeah, that's, I ain't gonna, fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice, whatever, whatever, shame on you, shame on me. So, no, I can relate to that because, when I first started having a bunch of rentals in Philadelphia, the story I tell was a kid came with a bag of cash and, he was not what I did not expect him to look like the way he looked. And he bought a piece of property for me and he moved in. Like 6 months later, I'm in Philly and I'm driving to some of the properties. He's like, you got to go check out the house. I walk in, the first floor is in the exact same condition, gutted, but he's got a space heater in there. And in the basement, he built a skate park. That's all he was doing with the house. And I was like, and he gave me a bag of cash. Literally, it was a bag of cash. And I'm like, I can't do this again. This was dangerous. So, but you live and learn. And, those are the stories. Those are the war stories. But, 100% that everyone will make that mistake once. And then that won't happen again, or it shouldn't happen again.
That's right. Yep. 100%.
Yeah. Like for me, the thought process was never like, I'm going to become the world's best property manager. I just think that's ridiculous, and nor do I have a desire to. I like to do things to learn it enough that I can call bullshit on someone so that if I ever hire somebody or ever, whether it's internal or external, if I know now going through the process that, hey, my renovation should take 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and that, if you pre-lease it 2 weeks early, you'll have somebody moving in a few days after the renovation's finished, and someone else tries to tell me differently. Well, I've gone through the process and I know it's possible. I don't have to call 6 other people. I've gone through it. I've spoken to the contractors, worked on it myself, things of that nature. And that was always a thought process for me. It was, okay, let me do it enough so I have a little bit of a decent understanding, and at least the understanding too of how all the mechanics work. So if 5 years from now, somebody else is doing it and they're like, oh, this contractor didn't show up, so we had to delay it and it pushed everybody back 3 days. I can sit there and figure out whether it was, it's really something that happens or it's them trying to, cover up for their mistake or something like that. So that was my whole thought process behind it, where, I just felt like I never had a really good understanding of the physical aspects of the property. Like I've learned so much since I've started managing and looking at renovations and doing all different things, as well as just like the operations of dealing with people, collecting checks, eventually, leasing units to people, all those things. I just think it's going to make me have a better bullshit detector in the future.
Yeah, I'm sure it probably will. Again, that experience is what really drives it, right? And you're that's how you get it. Is you just gotta get out there. That's how I got mine. Of course, I took the check and it bounced and I had to evict and do all that stuff. And I learned. I'm like, okay, it's this is why the books say what the books say. So next time I'm gonna just do it that way.
Mm-hmm. I hear you.
And we spoke about that. At the end of the day, everyone thinks it's not going to happen to them, right? But when it does, the successful people learn from that mistake and don't make it again. And I think that's something that is important to understand, is that none of us here are telling you to listen to the books like gospel, because I know them will. But when you make the mistake, and just don't make it again.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I didn't make it again because ever since that point, I've always had a third-party manager. That's how I saved myself from making that mistake again.
Listen, there's something to be said about when you're managing your own deals. There's that personal element to it, right? Like I know I've spoken to Chris about this. When you're managing your own deals, the last thing you want the tenant to know is that you're the owner, because they're going to take, I don't want to say they're going to take advantage, but they're going to treat that situation totally different. And I own a small mobile home park upstate. When I go there, I say I work for management, because if they knew that I was the physical check writer behind that, the stories that you would hear, it'd just be, they'd be absolutely insane. I had a tenant the other day telling me she's suing the post office because the mailman stole her check because they cleared and we didn't get them. And I said, well, can you show me the cleared check? I don't have to show you the cleared check. I'm like, okay, then sue the fucking post office. What do you want me to tell you? I mean, it's completely insane. But no, exactly. Like you said, I think, but understanding and learning and doing definitely helps, as opposed to just plug and play out of the box. Then you don't know if it's working or not. So there is a trial by fire that I think everyone should go through. But be that as it may. And I know we're coming up here on time. Brian, real quick, where are you going? What do you think? You know, what's the company look like 2022 to 2024? What are you guys looking to achieve?
Well, you know, I guess if you would have asked me a year ago, I said we were looking to achieve a scale of, you know, around 10,000, 15,000 units. We keep shooting ourselves in the foot, though, because we've been selling so much property that, you know, we buy 1,000 units a year and we're still losing unit count. So what I'm really trying to achieve is I'm trying to achieve a result for my investors, right? I measure my success by my ability to generate return for them that's, you know, hopefully equal to or greater than what we told them to expect. That's really to me the definition of success. And while we're aiming for scale, and you know, I could see our company growing into 10 or 15,000 units and then doing an UPREIT as an ultimate exit in several years and giving everybody liquidity and still having the ability to stay in the deal as long as they wanted to with full liquidity and all that kind of stuff, including myself. I could see that as being, you know, an ultimate exit plan. But then again, you know, I'm also looking at like, this is what I like to do. And it's one thing I'm good at, and I'll probably still be doing it in 20 years. So, you know, maybe an exit for me isn't anything I'm going to think about too hard anytime soon.
I completely understand that, because, you know, real estate's a hobby, right? Even when I'm not doing the Toro side and the multifamily syndication side and raising money, I find myself just messing around in the real estate space doing something. And the same thing, you know, originally when I first, you know, I want to own 2,500 units and manage and then realize that, you know, you accumulate them, but then you sell faster than you can buy. So it makes a ton of sense. I know we're, you know, keeping a close eye on time. Chris, anything else?
No, I think that's it. I think that's a good place to wrap. Brian, thanks for coming on. If people want to check you out, follow you, learn more about you, where can they do all that stuff?
Well, best places are through our website, which is praxcap.com. It's praxcap.com. I can be found on Instagram at Investor Brian Burke. Of course, you can check out the book. It's on biggerpockets.com/syndication book. And you can usually find me hanging around on Bigger Pockets, answering questions in the forums and that sort of stuff. So I'm around. You can find me.
Awesome. Guys, definitely go check him out. Definitely check out the book. It's going to have a ton of great information in there. And thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. If you're not already subscribed, it would mean the world to John and I if you would do so. And if you already are, please send it to someone that would get a tremendous amount of value from this episode. Brian, once again, thank you so much for coming on. This was awesome.